Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? If so, just say yes in the chat, please. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Amanda Huff, and I am a member of the state evaluation team. And on behalf of the other members of the SET, we would like to thank you all for joining us today for the State Fiscal Year 24 HCBS webinar. So a couple things before we get started, I would like to remind you to place your device on mute throughout the webinar today. And today, the webinar will be made available to all attendees, and the webinar session is also being recorded currently. And then at the end of the webinar, there will be a time for questions, but feel free to submit questions in the chat function throughout the presentation, and we will circle back to those. So during today's webinar, you will hear from each of the members of the SET or the state evaluation team. And presenting today will be Elaine Trepanier, the HCBS team lead, Julia Allen, our critical incident reporting specialist, and John Pettigrew, our QA or quality assurance specialist, Hannah Carlson, our HCBS setting specialist, and myself. And so Today, we'll be covering a variety of topics and recent updates, including those related to the end of the public health emergency, program status, and an overview of HCBS programs. Okay, next. Oh, back to staff updates, please. All right, so this current slide just provides a list of the team members, each of our roles, and how we can be contacted. And I'd like to point out that the last column provides the list of CMHCs or centers that we are each the primary contact for. So without further delay, let's get started. And our first presenter today is Jonquil Pettigrew.
No. Did you go off mute? Can you guys hear me okay? Alrighty, so I will be discussing the changes related to the STP and the PHE ending. All right, public health emergency and Medicaid unwinding updates. As of 4/1/23, we have returned to normal practices prior to the declaration of the public health emergency in 2020. Auto and emergency renewals have been discontinued. There is a continuation of telehealth services started due to the public health emergency and became folded into the Indiana Administrative Code. Right. Statewide transition plan fulfillment. Most notable change, all settings must be assessed and deemed compliant with final rule prior to application approval. Some ongoing monitoring. Due to the state transition plan completion, we are currently in an ongoing monitoring phase. Ongoing monitoring sites have been completed for state fiscal year 2023, and ongoing monitoring sites visits for state fiscal year 24 will resume soon. Ongoing monitoring continued. In addition to the ongoing monitoring site visits, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services is required a supplemental provider self-assessment. A condensed version of the provider self-assessment will be sent out at the same time as the ongoing monitoring site visit notifications starting state fiscal year 24. A blank assessment form for each type of site that will be visited will be provided, and we will be requesting the self-assessment to be returned within 2 weeks of receiving the site visit notification email. Alrighty. Next is the residential setting screening tool. Members who receive services through AMHH and or BPHC program are required to live and receive HCBS services in settings that meet federal Medicaid guidelines for home and community-based services. Complete with every member applying for AMHH and or BPHC with every application that concludes initial renewals and modifications. Any changes in members' living situations, an RSST must be submitted to DMHA within 15 days of an address change. A completed copy of this screening with the members and the case manager's signature in the appropriate selection must be kept with the member's clinical record. In addition, the current living situation selected on the DARMA application should reflect this setting.
All right, so now we're just going to go over some policy updates and analysis. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. So some general updates regarding the DFR denied status. So many of you may have noticed that a client's application in DARMA has a status of DFR denied soon after an application is DMHA approved. This is due to a limited status of categories sent to DARMA from Gainwell, which is the system that processes Medicaid applications. And DFR plans to add the status of undergoing review in place of the DFR denied when undergoing DFR review. And we just encourage that for any questions regarding an individual's DFR eligibility review status, we recommend that you contact the DFR agent or case manager directly. Next, please. So The ANSA, or the Adult Needs and Strengths Assessment, must be completed by a qualified ANSA user within 60 days prior to the submission of the BPHC application in Dharma. The ANSA is used to determine an individual's level of need for intensity of services. When doing the ANSA, that a corresponding progress note needs to include if the assessment was completed face-to-face or by telehealth, and that the individual participated. And so one of the things, this last item is pretty important, is that the ANSA must be completed prior to the start of the draft of the BPHC application. And so Dharma will only, and this is because Dharma will only pull the most recent ANSA into the BPHC application. So therefore, if the ANSA is completed or entered in Dharma after the BPHC application has been submitted, Dharma will only recognize the prior assessment, which is typically more than 60 days before submission, and the application would then be considered for denial. Next, please. So along with the ANSA, there are some, one significant update is that OMPP recently provided an updated interpretation of the ANSA telehealth practice. So currently, Indiana Administrative Code identifies that any person who is a CMHC employee and qualified to perform an ANSA can complete the assessment either face-to-face or by telehealth. Therefore, OMPP now has updated their interpretation. So this no longer limits ANSAs being completed via telehealth only by a licensed clinician. But still, the documentation of the ANSA must include whether the ANSA was completed face-to-face or by telehealth. Next. Okay. And then for the super user, one change that we have made beginning July 1st of this year is that documentation of the super user review is required to be documented as part of the attestation or in a progress note. And this is merely to streamline how documentation of this review is consistent with CMS standards. Next, please. So as John will mentioned earlier, is that the public health emergency ended. And so practices prior to the PHE are now in place or have been reinstated. So this includes denying applications that do not meet clinical eligibility. And so the list here is the following 6 points are the reasons an application will be subject to a denial for not meeting clinical criteria. And that is if the application is in pending status for more than 7 days, if the applicant does not meet one or more of the eligibility criteria, which includes being 19 years of age or over, having a BPHC eligible primary mental health diagnosis, does not reside or does not reside in a home or community-based setting. If the supporting documentation is insufficient and the IICP is not supporting the needs-based criteria for BPHC service, or it's not focusing on medical management or medical issues, that the applicant does not meet the needs-based criteria via the algorithm, if the ANSA score is less than 3. So if the ANSA score is less than 3, there is no recommendation for intensive community-based care based on the ANSA at that point. And then lastly, if the ANSA is older than 60 days. So at the time of the BPHC application was submitted, if the effective ANSA recognized by the Dharma BPHC application was outside the 60-day allowable window. Next, please. So of course, with denials, there is an appeal process. So first, there is the notification of the denial itself, and that is sent by email to the clinician and the primary contact for the mental health center who is submitting the application, and then also to the applicant by certified mail. In the notification, it includes the instructions for appealing, and appeals are time time sensitive, so appeals must be received by close of business no later than 33 calendar days following the effective date of action being appealed, or 33 calendar days from the date of the notice of agency action, whichever is later. Next, please. So each year, the state evaluation team conducts quality assurance reviews, or QA reviews, of all 24 mental health centers, community mental health centers across the state. And so some of the trends that came out of our most recent state fiscal year 23 QAs is that 6 agencies had their overall percentage improve by more than 10% since the previous year. And then we also saw a trend of 6 agencies that their overall percentage decreased or went down 10% since the previous year. And then overall, there were 5 agencies that did not require a corrective action plan for this recent year. Next, please. So with the BPHC policy and QA trends, so as previously stated, during a QA, the SET reviews documentation of BPHC services for each randomly selected chart. And this slide is pulled directly from the BPHC state plan amendment and states, go ahead, next slide, that there are 3. If the state also requires a minimum frequency for the provision of 1915I services other than monthly to specify the frequency. And so therefore, there are 3 instances of the BPHC service must be provided to each eligible member every 180 days and documented in progress notes. And this became effective as of October 1st, 2020. And just a reminder for documentation of BPHC services is that BPHC renewal service can be included as one of those 3 services. Next, please. So we all know that documentation is pretty important. And so this just kind of generalizes some of the key points is that, obviously documentation is a significant part of every quality assurance review that the state evaluation team conducts. So this next one, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. The majority of my career has been spent in direct service, and this was frequently emphasized that basically if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So it's really important to document. We all know that documentation also lets us see the progress of a client goals and their development of their strengths and skills over time, as well as in a person's absence or a staff person's absence, it allows for others to provide the quality service in their absence. Next, please. So for HCBS setting information, there's a great deal of information about that. And if you are wanting to learn more or need to refresh your knowledge of these HCBS settings, we just encourage you to follow the link to the most recent training on HCBS Final Rule Review and updates, which can be located on the DMHA website. And now I'm going to pass to Hannah.
Good morning. I'm Hannah Carlson. I'll be introducing a new process that your agency may utilize in the event that a new setting assessment results in the setting being found ineligible with HCBS final rule. We're calling this process ineligible setting type exceptions. When you reach out to us to have a new setting assessed, we would continue to follow the same assessment process. And if the end result of that assessment is that the setting is found to be ineligible with final rule, at that time, a settings exception can be requested. If you submit a settings exception plan to us and that is approved, DMHA and OMPP reserve the right to change the status at any time if it is determined that the plan is not adhered to. Any modification to the plan will require additional approval from DMHA. This slide shows the 8 requirements that must be documented in the settings exception plan. If you're familiar with the modified IICP process, these are the same 8 criteria. When reaching out in regards to requesting an ineligible settings exception, we can provide for you a fillable form that you can document a response for each of these 8 criteria. And additionally, we'll we will be requesting a copy of the individual's most recent treatment plan. I'll just quickly read out each of these points, but as mentioned, a copy of this PowerPoint will be provided so that you could review this section at a later date if needed. 1, identify a specific and individualized assessed need. 2, document the positive interventions and supports used prior to any modification to the person-centered service plan. 3, document less intrusive methods of meeting the need that have been tried but did not work. 4, include a clear description of the condition that is directly proportionate to the specific assessed need. 5, include regular collection and review of data to measure the ongoing effectiveness of the modification. 6, include established time limits for periodic reviews to determine if the modification is still necessary or can be terminated. 7, include the informed consent of the individual. And 8, include an assurance that interventions and supports will cause no harm to the individual. As you saw on the last slide, the policy in item 6 did not specify a specific time limit for periodic review, but DMHA will be invoking a minimum of 90-day review to fulfill this requirement. If you have a setting exception plan approved, I will give you a deadline for when the next plan will be due when I send out a confirmation email.
And, this is Julia Allen. I will be taking over for the critical incident reporting section. So first up, I just want to discuss the only major change to incident reporting thus far this year. And this is related to how we report COVID-19 cases. Previously, as many of you know, the guidelines were for individuals residing in a residential setting. If 5 or more individuals test positive for COVID, we required that an incident report be filed through DMHA's system. And then additionally, providers were required to report the COVID-19 positive cases to the Indiana Department of Health. Currently, DMHA is no longer requiring providers to report when they have 5 or more individuals within a residential setting who test positive. And we ask that you please refer to the Indiana Department of Health's guidance for how they would like you to continue. Again, as it has been mentioned, these slides will be available after, so you'll be able to click on that link. Next, we'll be doing an overview of critical incident reporting for those receiving BPHC or AMHH programming. First, I want to go over reporting timeframes, as this is one of the major ways that we measure compliance. So first, for individuals residing in residential settings, we ask that the critical incident report be filed within 24 hours of the incident occurring. For those residing in outpatient community settings or the patient home, we have a 72-hour time frame. And again, for the outpatient settings, the 72 hours can be from the date that the clinician learned of the incident. Just be sure that all of that is noted, and should the report be late, there's a late compliance section that you can put any additional information in. It is important to note that the 24-hour and 72-hour timeframes are pretty firm. This is not business days, so that is within 24 hours of the incident recurring that the report would need to be filed. This next slide is going to be going over the reporting compliance table for our historical outcomes. We started out at 70% back with state fiscal year 19 and saw a steady increase in the years that follow, although we recently had a dip in this past year. I think in total, the score came out to 85.49%, so we just barely missed that 86% compliance rate. In the coming months, I'm going to be releasing a critical incident reporting mini webinar to help address this issue, but you can also reach out to me directly if you have any questions. Next, I want to dive into the compliance process. Off to the right, you'll see a table of the different AMHH and BPHC reporting schedules. You'll note that these dates differ between the two programs, as the BPHC began monitoring critical incident reporting on September 1st of 2019, while the AMHH began October 1st of 2019. At the end of each quarter, all CMHCs will receive a report of compliance for each quarter that is provided 15 days from the end of the quarter. So most notably, or for example, for quarter 1, that ends this month on August 31st, and all CMHCs should have their report from me by September 15th. Included in the reports, there will be any follow-up or any additional follow-up forms will be provided in those reports as well. And then the last part of this section will be dedicating to go over the different non-compliance actions that can be taken should that 86% compliance rate not be met. So the first action, we call that the informal adjustment, or an IA. So after the first 90-day non-compliant critical incident report review, you will receive a verbal or email guidance will be sent to the provider and the primary contact as deemed appropriate by the QA/QI staff. Within that email that is sent, we will provide data to show the compliance issues, including the incident date and the staff member who submitted the critical incident report. After a second consecutive 90-day non-compliant review, agencies will then receive an educational letter. This is considered to be a formal notice that is sent via email with read receipts or a request to respond, confirming receipts to the CEO and the identified primary contact for that provider. Within that notice, DMHA will provide data to show compliance issues, again showing the incident date and the staff member who submitted the critical incident report. The educational letter itself will identify the next steps if a third consecutive 90-day non-compliance review occurs. It's important to note that if after 2 quarters since the educational letter, the compliance falls below 86% again, another informal adjustment will be sent out. And then should there be 3 consecutive 90-day non-compliant critical incident report reviews, DMHA will send out a corrective action plan, or a CAP. This is called a formal notice letter written on FSSA letterhead requiring corrective action and an accompanying CAP that will be sent to the providers for a response. Again, important to note that if after 2 quarters since the CAP, compliance falls below 86% again, then an educational letter will be issued again. Important to know, just for what will be included within the corrective action plan, we ask that you identify the responsible party, a time frame for the completion of the corrective action plan, a method or a way for DMHA to verify that the CAP has been completed, a plan to prevent reoccurrence, and we expect that the plan be effective. Should there still need to be some actions taken after the CAP, other steps that we might take include a mandatory retraining or increased visits based on the progress, an increased request for documentation, and we might request that the staff be retrained before providing services going forward. And then graduated sanctions if we are still needing some actions to be taken. This could include decertification of specific staff members, a referral to the FSSA audit, or getting involved with program integrity. And then I'm going to pass you guys back over to Amanda Huff for the AMHH programming.
Hi, everybody, it's me again. So this next section, we're just going to go over just a general overview of the AMHH, or the Adult Mental Health Rehabilitation Program. Next slide, please. So here on this slide, AMHH and MRO are mutually exclusive programs designed to address different populations with different needs. So first off, MRO is focused on rehabilitation or regaining lost abilities, whereas AMHH is habilitative or focused on attaining and maintaining those abilities necessary for community integrated living. AMHH is most ideal for individuals who are or have not developed the skills necessary to live independently in the community, or at a significant risk of deterioration and or institutionalization without support. And so it's most ideal for those transitioning long-term consumers of rehabilitative services who have seen little progress towards their goals to focus on maintenance goals. Next, please. So this slide shows a side-by-side look at the services available in both MRO and AMHH. And so you'll see that there are similar services such as case management or care coordination, addiction counseling, etc. But then you also see some different services that are included in AMHH, such as adult day services, supported community engagement, respite care, for example. So AMHH provides what our team often refers to as a bucket of 8 different services that can be used anytime during the 360-day package period. Okay, next, please. So some important AMHH updates is that the SPA or the state
This is me?
no, this is SPA. I just
State
totally-
plan amendment.
The state plan amendment. I'm sorry about
Okay.
that, everybody. Just total blank. The state plan amendment renewal application has the renewal application for another 5 years was submitted to CMS in March of this year. And if it is approved, it will be effective September 1st of this year. So also in addition, there is an addition of a licensed clinician can now provide attestation in addition to a psychiatrist or an HSPP on the AMHH application. And then there have been some updates to the AMHH eligible primary mental health diagnoses. And so if you follow that link, you can get a full list of the diagnoses for AMHH. And like everybody has said, those these slides will be available to follow those links. And then finally, if you want to learn more details about AMHH, because this was just a very general overview of the program, please follow any of these links from the AMHH website for more information, or feel free to reach out to any member of the team. And now I will pass the baton to Jonquil.
All right, greetings. This is Jonquil again, and I will be covering the Behavioral Physical Healthcare Coordination Overview, or the BPHC. The purpose of BPHC, it is an HCBS program designed to support those at risk of institutionalization in managing and coordinating their primary healthcare and behavioral health needs. BPHC is a single service care coordination which supports clients whose mental health symptoms impede their ability to effectively and independently manage their physical health and or behavioral health needs. It allows clients living with severe mental illness to receive care in community integrated settings to a similar level as those receiving HCBS. It is concerned with supporting clients in goal achievement to attain their maximum level of independence and community engagement.
Okay. And this is Amanda again. I'm going to chime in a little bit on what Jonquil just reviewed about the purpose of the BPHC. And I just wanted to say that historically during the webinars, our team has provided examples that were focused more on healthcare needs rather than behavioral health needs. But just, want to remind everybody that BPHC is not limited, just solely addressing healthcare or medical needs and can be used for behavioral health needs. So, for example, your client's primary mental health diagnosis may change from a prior package and has different behavioral health needs than before. So definitely collaboration, communication, linking to resources may be a part of accessing those increase in services or those to meet those additional behavioral health needs. So.
Alrighty, and it's back to Jonquil now. The mental health diagnoses that are eligible. The applicant must have a BPHC eligible diagnosis as their primary diagnosis. The following are requirements for describing the diagnosis in the applications. Symptoms associated with the BPHC eligible primary diagnosis must be listed in list format. List should consist of symptoms experienced by the client that disrupt their ability to independently manage healthcare needs. We ask that you do not list additional diagnoses, physical health needs, intellectual and developmental delays or disabilities, or any information that does not directly pertain to the symptomology of the primary diagnosis. Any additional information that is added could be a violation of HIPAA. And to your right, you will see how we kind of like to have it set up, just in that list format. Next. Physical health issues. Provide any physical health issues faced by the client that they have difficulty managing on their own. Well, reported physical health issues do not have to be formally diagnosed, but should be impacting them. Historical injuries, illnesses that result in present-day complications are eligible. Physical health issues or injuries from which the client is fully recovered and does not experience complications are not eligible. Lack of history of accessing healthcare is an allowable health condition. BPHC services renewal application. Effective 10/1/2020, we ask that you provide 3 dates of service for the client receiving care coordination services. One of these 3 services can be the BPHC application. If fewer than 3 services are provided, we ask that you provide adequate rationale for the lack of engagement and to provide a plan for increased engagement over the next package period. And just so you guys are aware that chronic ongoing underutilization may result in a denial. The justification of need. The justification narrative should link the symptoms associated with the primary diagnosis to the behaviors that impede the applicant's ability to manage their physical health needs on their own. The narrative should only include information necessary to provide the set with insight into the challenges that the clients are facing in managing their health needs. And personal history, family detail, description of other services received, additional mental health diagnoses, and any other information not directly related to the symptoms or impeding behavior should not be included. And to the right, you can see kind of like the format of what we like to see when we're reviewing these applications. And that example below is just, Dorothy's symptoms of paranoia cause her not to have trust in healthcare providers and follow provider recommendations. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Amanda.
So continuing on with the BPHC overview, so the next section would be the goals. So the goals obviously is something that the individual would like to work on during their upcoming package period. That it should describe a behavior modification or achievement or some improvement that they would like to work towards during that time frame. So it's of course preferably written in a client's own words. We look for quotes that are entered, so that's always a good indication that it's very much person-centered. That the goal must reflect the client's personal desires, should link back to the identified physical and or their mental health needs, that it supports the client reaching their desired level of independence, and that is ideally it can be measured against. And an individual can have more than one goal that with a focus on either or and physical health and their behavioral health needs. And so these are just a couple examples that of goals that can be entered. For example, I would like to lose 30 pounds. I want to be able to walk to the store without using my inhaler. I want to have fewer panic attacks. Next, please. So once you establish that goal, Then the objectives, which is the next step, you come up with or develop those steps or those actions that the client will take to achieve their goal that they've identified. And so the objectives should build upon the client's strengths, their preferences, and any existing natural supports. It should not be passive in nature, meaning it is something that the client will do instead of or not what the client will allow or be provided to them. Objectives must be clearly linked to the goal or the goals listed in their plan, that it's personalized to the client, and it must be measurable. So for example, utilizing the goal, one of the goals from the previous slide, that I would like to lose 30 pounds. The objectives in this are identified as that client will attend meetings with dietitian once a month to plan healthy meals. Client will walk to mailbox once a day to increase physical activity, and client will reduce soda intake from 3 cans a day to 1 can per day. Next, please. So if the objectives identify what the client will do, the strategies then identify how the BPHC care coordination will be used to aid the client in working towards their goal. So BPHC, once again, is a single service of care coordination, which includes, here's a general list. For example, coordination of care within and across systems, education, advocacy, serving as a communication conduit and coaching for more effective communication with providers. The MRO or Medicaid rehabilitation option services are not to be included in strategies. This would include services such as ADL skill building, individual group therapy, medication training, and so on. But for a full list of services that are not BPHC eligible, we just encourage you to follow the link on the BPHC website to the BPHC provider reference module. Next, please. Excuse me. So once again, BPHC is one service. Only care coordination and qualifying services that are defined in final rule are billable for reimbursement. So the following list identifies activities that are not BPHC eligible. So those are things like, once again, MRO services such as therapy services, any service not described or supported by the clients on ICP, any leisure or recreational activities, and provision of medical services or treatments, including but not limited to weight checks, blood pressure screenings, and blood sugar checks. Next, please. So each service requires a progress note or documentation. So, and so all the documentation is required to contain the following, and that is that it reflects, reflects the progress towards the goal or the goals from the member's IICP, that it be provided within the eligibility period, that documents the duration of service, that it accurately and adequately describes the service being rendered, that is written and signed by the agency staff rendering services, that it supports the coordination of management of identified health needs and services, identifies the member strengths being utilized. It identifies that it natural supports are incorporated to identify that, and to that it describes the services benefit to the client. Recently, a mini webinar was placed on our website, so that is available on the BPHC website or by following the link about progress note documentation. And then finally for me, so prior authorization. So for most members, 48 units per package period is enough to meet an individual's needs. However, you might ask what happens when BPHC units start running out. So there is a prior authorization or a PA process available. So the process begins that within the last 60 days of an assigned service package, that update the IICP and submit a PA request in Dharma for review and at that time select a modified IICP. All PA requests must include the following information, and that is the member's name, their Dharma, internal, and IICP ID numbers, the number of units remaining in their package, the number of units being requested, and a general description of the activities that led to the exhaustion of the BPHC units, and a description of how the additional units requested will be used to support the member's needs and support fulfillment of the IICP over the remainder of the package period. And supporting documentation or progress notes may be requested from the set for a final determination. Now it's going to pass to Julia to wrap up today's session.
Okay. As Amanda said, I'll just be wrapping up today. First of all, we just wanted to show you all our contact information one more time. As Amanda mentioned, we've divided our 24 community mental health centers up between the 4 set team members. If you ever have a question, you can reach out to your primary contact directly, or down at the bottom, we've listed the general inboxes. You can always email us through there as well, whichever you prefer. And then before we go, I'm going to pass you guys over to Elaine. She's going to discuss some updates we have to the AMHH and B4 waiver.
Can everyone hear me? This is my first time experimenting with the mic today. Sorry. Any yes in the chat or? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks. So yeah, wanting to give an announcement. Thanks everyone. Wanting to give an announcement about the status of the B4 waiver and the AMHH SPA. So we don't tend to discuss the B4 waiver during these annual webinars. So this might be new terminology for folks, but the B4 waiver is something that's been in place since HCBS 1959 programming started here in Indiana. It was actually in conjunction with the AMHH program, which was the first application sent to CMS for 1959 programming, and BPHC was on its heels. And what the B4 waiver allows for in home and community-based services is selective contracting or selective provider utilization. So the B4 waiver is actually the mechanism that Indiana uses to maintain HCBS services being delivered through the community mental health center system. So we do not actually certify other types of providers to deliver adult home and community-based services. It's only through the CMHC system. And this is that, like I said, this is that mechanism to do that. Each of the state plan amendments and the B4 waiver are actually provided in 5-year increments. And so we are up for reapplication for our AMHH SPA as we speak, and CMS has that reapplication. You all might recall a public comment period for the AMHH SPA earlier this year. I think probably about March-ish, February, March, or somewhere in there. There was also a tribal comment period. And we are currently working on the BPHC state plan amendment reapplication as well, because like I said, BPHC was on the heels of AMHH. So that one will be next, and we're working on that draft with OMPP now. But like I said, the B4 waiver was in tandem with that. And so we are up for reapplication of our B4 waiver, which was to be submitted with the AMHH SPA. And when we were preparing those documents and having back and forth with CMS, federal Medicaid, we learned that inadvertently during the first 2 applications for the B4 waiver, or excuse me, the first reapplication, that we were meant to undergo an independent assessment by an external agency. And that did not occur. And actually CMS did not provide guidance on that during our first reapplication. And CMS is not quite sure why that occurred, and neither is OMPP. But what it does mean is that this reapplication is being extended in order for the independent assessment to occur. So what we've been assured by CMS is that there will be no disruption in services. They are going to approve the AMHH state plan amendment regardless of the status of the independent assessment. And that gives us time to pursue the independent assessment. So there will be no disruption in services. And as this appears to be, you know, a series of breakdowns, CMS is being obviously quite flexible and helpful to us. DMHA and OMPP have secured an external vendor to conduct the independent assessment. And for those of you who are familiar with WISE Indiana, that is who OMPP has procured to complete the independent assessment, and that was in part because of their historical knowledge of HCBS programming in Indiana anyway. And they also have all of the functions needed according to CMS in order to conduct the independent assessment. We are expected to take about 9 months to complete that. And that is not entirely in part all of the time of the independent assessment, but also for us to undergo public comment on that again, including tribal public comment, and for it to be submitted to CMS and for their review. So that's we just wanted folks to be aware. End of day, Amy, it's end of day, sorry, or end of business. So yeah, we just wanted folks to be aware of what was going on in the background with our B4 waiver, and to be assured that there would be no disruption in services, and to be aware that there will be a public comment period that we would love for you to all participate in too. So I think there may be, does anyone have any questions about that piece in particular before we move on to other questions or comments? Okay. I think, Jolie, you and I were having some back and forth. Do you want to come off mute and pose your question, so maybe we can get on the same page about what the question is and appropriately give an answer?
Sure. Would you mind going back to that slide? I wish I could tell you exactly where it was. The slide where we talked about physical.
Here, Julie is backtracking. Just say when.
It was the introduction part.
Bit more.
Yeah, a bit more.
Purpose.
It had insomnia on it, abolition.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, insomnia and abolition. Was that in the justification of need then? Okay. All right. So, okay. So, so what's the question?
Well, there was talk of being able to pursue BPHC, at least my understanding, in the absence of any physical health needs.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No. So an individual still needs to have behavioral health needs and physical health needs in tandem, as well as, of course, an ANSA 3 or higher, an eligible primary diagnosis. I think what the team, and team, correct me if I'm wrong, was trying to convey that is that when using BPHC services, that BPHC can be used to address the behavioral health need and not just the physical health needs. Is that what we were discussing. I'm getting nods. I'm getting head nods. So I passed the test. Does that help answer your question, or does that leave you with more?
Nope, I'm
Oh,
good.
yeah, that helps.
Okay, groovy. All right, I'm passing it back to the team. Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. There was more questions. Team saying answer them. Oh, Jessica, elaborate on super user documentation and what is to be needed. Jessica, do you want to come off mute and verbalize the question so I don't misinterpret?
Yep. So the slide was about super user documentation, which is new. And I just was looking for some clarification as to what that documentation is to be expected and where, because thus far we haven't had to do any of that other than fill out the little box on the attestation form and then put in our super user date and sign the forms.
Sure. Julia, do you mind backing up to that super user slide? So Jessica, I think you are fine. What we've seen over the past few years is some disparity in how a super user has been documented. And what we're asking, and so as you see here, it's to be documented as part of the attestation or in a progress note. So nothing changing. We're just being more specific and requesting how it's documented. We've in the past accepted kind of anything anywhere, and it has led to some confusion, and at times we weren't always getting signatures that we felt that were verifiable, and that the agencies felt that were verifiable. And so to minimize that confusion, we're asking for it solely in one of two places, either on that attestation form, which, by the way, if everyone has fancy signatures and we can't read them, we'll need you to also print your name so that we can in fact verify that you have had the super user booster that is in the SPA. That is one of the components we're verifying. So if you have a beautiful signature, please also print your name or have it typed into your document. The other alternative is to document in a progress note that the super user review occurred. And then of course we have your sort of stamp by way of your EMR progress note, who you are and when that was conducted.
Okay, great. Thanks for the clarification. I just wanted,
Yeah.
I read it as if it was a change. We need to do something in addition to, and so if we're good, awesome. Thank
You're
you.
good. You're so good. Yeah, no, good question. All right, and is that Miss Melissa with her hand raised? I'm sorry. I wasn't sure.
That's okay.
I came on late, so I didn't know if it was old. I'm sorry.
It is. So I have several questions.
Oh, all right.
I know.
No,
So
let's do this.
on the telehealth, I just want to be clear. We can do the answer by telehealth. Are we also able to do the BPHC assessments by telehealth?
Yeah, so we got updated interpretation from OMPP, and that based on what's in the telehealth manual and what went out in bulletins, is that CMHCs have the capacity to determine what services are telehealth. I think there are some obvious exceptions and things omitted, like obviously skills needs to be something that's done in person because
Sure.
of the nature of the service. But it's our understanding and our from OMPP that the updated interpretation is that CMHCs, if it's a service you can provide telehealth, then we can review it that way as either
Okay.
in person or telehealth.
Okay. So with that being said, so we can capture their signatures by writing on there that we did it by telehealth, but what do
Yep.
we do about the CMHC letter we have to give them and the HCBS brochure and those things?
If they have a mailing address and they're comfortable with you mailing it to them, that is fine. I'm sure there's also some services that they're still coming in for that could be provided to them at the next service. I will say, with, this telehealth landscape is still, even though we've been experimenting with it for a few years now, it's still relatively new, and
Sure.
CMS is starting to realize that they need to provide some more guidance to states. And so what I think we will start seeing more, just to anticipate it, is that when using telehealth, that agencies or providers are still seeking opportunities for in-person connection or demonstrating community connection where possible. So I think even when telehealth is used, even maybe heavily in some circumstances where, we're overcoming agoraphobia or something like that, really, really extreme situations, that there still is an attempt to connect with someone in person. So just to
Sure.
keep that in mind. So whether it's
Yeah.
someone being comfortable having it mailed to them or being given to them at their next service, it's I think whatever works for you all and the person.
Correct. Okay. Well, we prefer to do them all in person, but I just wanted to clear that up just in the event that something happens. The other question I had, because this actually just came up yesterday with one of our clients, in the change of address, those have to be submitted within 15 days, and we use the RSST to do that. But this client has moved 3 hours away from us. So in that situation, can we write that where the signature is? How do we capture the signature for that if they have moved out of the area?
Are you still liable for their services?
They are being transferred to Centerstone. So we were going to do a soft handoff, but I'm not sure like where that's at in process. So I wanted to make sure that we got in our change of address. Because of course, this is all on the cusp of his BPHC package ending.
Renewal.
So we're trying,
Yeah. Could you, maybe along with the Centerstone staff that you're collaborating with, email into, who works with LifeSpring? Hang on, I'll get you a teammate.
It's Jonquil.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you, with your Centerstone colleagues, email Jonquil and just say, hey, this is the person's Dharma ID, and we can let it chill and rest until, maybe just send us the address so that we can just verify it's an HCBS eligible setting. And then we can let that person go ahead and complete their transition and go through reapplication. We'll just verify that the address is good to go. And since it sounds like there's a lot of things in flux, let's have some flexibility there. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I had a question about the ineligible setting types exception. I just want to make sure I understand. So this would be used maybe for a non-POCO SGL or like a halfway house. Is that what we're, okay, I just want to make sure I understood.
So I mean, true to CMS form, application of this is, has some clear cut yeses and nos, and then it's got more vague than it does that. So, once we found out that we had this capability, we had clients that we knew that were eligible for this approach. And so just in those cases, for example, those were sober living environments. And so, just using that as a for example to kind of consider what setting types. But ultimately what we're looking at are settings that we would assess for eligibility first. And then if they don't meet eligibility, because of course we want to try first for eligibility, right? And then if not, then we have this capability. And so so I would just say, if you have a setting that you would like to consider to send it our way, we still have the non-negotiable of a setting that's institutional in nature. So we can't apply it to that. So, but yeah, if you have something in mind, then let's take a look. Well, Hannah will.
And then my last thing is I just want to be clear on the justification of needs slide. It does still state only physical health needs. So I just wanted to make sure that was
that
intentional.
We update that. Thank you.
Or, so that that may have just been an oversight. So we can then also include that behavioral health piece.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll fix that. Thank you for helping us
Sure.
see. Yeah.
And then the only other thing that I want to say, and I know I've said this before, but I think what confuses a lot of our care managers is that the goals that are often on the IECP are very relatable to skills training type things rather than coordination. And I think that's where that gets confused. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if someone says, hey, I want to lose 30 pounds, most of the things that are going to be on that list are things that maybe the case manager is doing skills training for, like exercise, healthy meals, that kind of thing. So it kind of doesn't match what we say about BPHC in some ways. And I think that's confusing. Do you ever see, and I've asked this before, a change in how those things can be utilized together to count for the program, or is it still just always going to be kind of that separation? Does that make sense?
Yes and no. I see your point. I see how, so we see goals, everything from the I want to lose weight to we've seen I want stable housing. You know, we've seen I want to feel less anxious and things like that. And so yeah, I see how when we think of problem solving, that probably feels more action oriented and therefore more skills oriented. But what I would say is down in the objectives, that's an opportunity. While we really want the strategies to be very clear about what the BPHC care coordinator is doing, the objectives can be a variety of things and can include like formal and informal ways that the client is going to work on that goal. And so that may be the area to capture what they're going to do in skills to work on their goal. And then those strategy sections become, how is care coordination going to support working on that goal? So I think that answers the question about like, do they have to be separate? They don't have to be on separate plans. We just have to be able to clearly see how care coordination is going to support that.
Right. And that makes sense. I just know that like right now we're trying to audit our clients, and what we're finding is that we have clients that utilize a huge amount of ADL skills, right, that they need, even if it's going to the doctor and teaching them like how to fill out the paperwork and that type of thing. But then we lack in the BPHC area. So I'm just trying to figure out ways to clearly help define that more with our case managers, because obviously if they're getting tons of services, we don't want them to lose that opportunity to have that case manager, but we've got to really set a tone for like what BPHC is and how to get that utilization up, if that makes sense. And that's kind of I think where we're struggling.
Yeah.
So, but thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And, you know, if you're endorsing feeling a struggle in that area, I'm sure lots of other folks are feeling it too. So one of the team, I think Amanda is working on a mini webinar for eligible versus ineligible services. So maybe I think Melissa, we've connected over this in the past too, but what might make sense is maybe after we get that webinar prepped, maybe we could just send out an invite for if anybody just wants to come to like a discussion, not like a formal webinar like this, but maybe we can just get, you know, anyone who's interested in this topic together to just brainstorm and talk about, you know, what is and isn't a BPHC service. Is that something folks would be interested in?
Yeah, I think that would be great and really helpful.
Okay.
Because obviously whatever I'm saying is not working.
All right.
So,
well,
you know, I'm not sure where the disconnect is, you know.
Well, let's look at the support from the chat. So let's get creative, and you know, I might do something corny like challenge everybody to bring 5 ideas of yay versus nay, eligible versus ineligible.
I think that's great. I do. Thank you so much. You guys are always so helpful.
Well, thank you. No, I appreciate the collaboration and helping illuminate where we may be having some blind spots and how we can be supportive. Amanda Mullins had a question in the chat about applications and RSSTs being done actual signature and in person. So Amanda, your agency may have a specific requirement. So check with your colleagues on that. So we defer to the agencies on how services are conducted, but according to Indiana code and what's in the state plan amendment, applications and RSSTs can be done via telehealth, but when documenting that, when making your service note and on the document itself, you have to capture that verbal authorization or approval was obtained. And that needs to be narrated in the progress note. We need to be able to crosswalk very clearly what occurred during the service. And if we don't see that language, we don't count it as verified. So maybe just check with your colleagues on that.
You answered a question to Brandy Wood about
Let's do it this way. Who else has questions that haven't been answered? The chat is full. If Jill, did you have one? Jill, questions about financial eligibility should go to Division of Family Resources. We very clearly, our scope is the clinical eligibility, and we stay in that lane. So I would reach out to Division of Family Resources about that question. What other questions are out there?
question about eligibility in the algorithm.
Oh, Jolie, did we answer your question about the algorithm?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, Julia, do you want to flip to the slide with the contact information? We'll just throw contact information up real quick so that everybody can see it again one more time before we part ways, in case there's anybody you want to reach out to. But yeah, it's good to connect with everybody. Thanks for the ideas. Thanks for the questions. Team, did you guys have any other last things that you wanted to throw out there?
Just thank you for your time. We appreciate you guys all listening to us today.
All right, that's it. Thanks for everything you guys do. Thanks for taking time with us. We appreciate you. We'll see you soon.